everyone. So the next tool that we are going to look at is our sweep tool. So I'm in my 122 CAD Models folder, and I am going to choose Create, and I'm going to choose Document, and I'm going to name this 1.2.2 Sweep, and then my last name. Then I'm going to click OK, and it's going to load my workspace area. Now for the sweep tool, I am going to start by creating a new sketch, and I'm going to do that on my front plane. Once I've done that, I'm going to move my menu just out of my way temporarily, and then I'm going to use my view cube to rotate to the front. Now we're going to use a tool we haven't used before, and that is the spline tool, which is right over here. So a spline allows us to make curved edges, and typically, I'd be really concerned about making sure it's the right size and shape and dimensioning, but paper clips come in all shapes and sizes now. So I want you just to do the best you can to draw a basic paper clip. So I'm going to start a little bit below this center line, and I'm going to click, and it's going to start to create a line. So I'm going to go up to about where I want the beginning of my first curve to be. So I'm starting on the inside of the rectangle. So I'm going to come to about here, and I'm going to click. And then I'm actually going to go across this vertical line and stay about as parallel to that first dot as I can. And I'm going to try and eyeball about a similar distance away from the middle line. And I'm going to click again. Now you'll notice as I start moving down, it curves that edge for me. So now I have 3 points that are indicating that first curve. So now I'm going to come down here to the bottom edge, or closer to the bottom, and I'm going to click. And I'm going to mimic that same motion. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to go a little bit higher than that first dot, because this is where I'm going to have it start curving around, back up around the top. So I'm going to click, and then I'm going to follow up here. And I'm going to replicate that same pattern that I did before, where I'm going to click and move parallel, except I'm coming way over here to create this far side. Now this is not a perfect rectangle, it's more like a loop, and that's fine. So once I've got that last point, I'm just going to hit my enter key, or I'm going to hit my escape key, sorry, and it's going to have this shape. Now I can, if I want to, grab these points. Once I hit my escape key and drop my tool, let me undo that. Once I don't have anything selected, I can grab these points and I can adjust them by pulling them in and moving them around. I need to be careful doing that because as I move them, it does affect other parts of the geometry, but it does let me kind of clean this up a little bit and get it a little bit closer to that paperclip shape that I'm looking for. So I'm going to move this guy this way, move this over. I'm actually going to bring this down a little bit more. So is this perfect? No, it's not. I'm not necessarily looking for a perfect paperclip here. I just want the shape to be kind of close. So now that I've done this, I'm going to hit the green check mark. And now if I go back to my isometric view from my view cube, I can see I have this spline just hanging out here. But we can't do the sweep tool quite yet, because the way the sweep tool works is it needs to have a predetermined surface to generate from. Okay, so before I can use my sweep tool, I actually have to add circles to the points on my sweeps. That way it has surfaces to work with. So I'm going to grab my sketch tool, and I'm going to start a new sketch on the top plane. Now I'm choosing top plane because I need to be able to have those circles come out and around these points. So I'm going to grab my circle tool, and I'm going to go about where that point is, and I'm going to draw my circle. Now, the true diameter of a paperclip is very tiny. It's actually 0.031 inches, and that's going to make a very tiny circle, but it will serve our purpose. So I'm going to grab my circle tool again, and I'm going to come over here and do the same thing around this point. So I am going to dimension to that very, very small dimension. And again, they're very tiny. That's okay. Okay, so now before I go and choose my sweep tool, I'm actually going to turn off sketch 1. So that way I only see these circles. And I'm going to grab my sweep tool, and it says faces and regions to sweep. So I'm going to start by selecting here to here, and then I need to turn sketch 1 back on. I'm going to select my sweep path and click here. And you'll see that it generates this really cool paperclip looking shape. And I'm going to hit my check mark. So now if I go to the front, you'll see that I have the extra little bits right here that are my sweep path. So it followed that path and it actually created this really crazy looking series of 3 paper clips. So it swept across all of that. Aha. So I just was able to remove one of those crazy looking paper clips because I was able to go in here and it had actually selected that region twice. So I now have my paper clip. And if I turn off sketch 1 and I turn off the planes, I can see my paper clip pretty well. And that's the end of that model. All right, so our next model that we're going to create is to practice using the mirror tool in sketch mode. So we are not actually using any features in this model, but to start, I'm going to use the create option and choose document. And again, this is 1.2.2, and I'm just going to call this mirror sketch mode and put my last name on it. And then I'm going to hit OK. It's going to load my workspace. And so what we're going to be practicing is the mirror tool in sketch mode. So I need to create a sketch. So I'm going to choose sketch, and then I'm going to choose my top plane. So once I have that sketch there, I'm going to click top on the view cube so it rotates in front of me. And what it gives me is a basic shape. Now this actually doesn't have any dimensions on it. So I am just going to really quickly draw this shape. I'm actually going to start on my center line. And I'm going to start by just drawing a rectangle. Size does not matter because we don't have dimensions for this one. And I'm going to hit the escape key. The next thing I'm going to do is grab my rectangle tool. And I'm going to place a thin rectangle right here. And then I need 2 circles in the corners. So I'm going to draw a circle here and a circle here. So now what I need to do is I need to draw one more line, and it needs to go from above the model to below the model. And once I have that line created, I'm going to hit escape, and then I need to select that line and make it a construction line, just like we've done in previous drawings. Now what's different this time is that instead of either revolving or something along those lines with our construction line, we are going to come over here to the mirror tool. And it wants us to select the entities to be mirrored. So I'm going to click on all of the objects that I want to be mirrored, and it's going to automatically populate these across that construction line. So once I have all of my objects selected, I'm then going to hit my check mark and my object is finished. And that is how we use the mirror tool in sketch mode. As you can see, it's a super fast way to create a symmetrical object because all I had to do was draw half of it and then click, and it magically appeared on the opposite side of that construction line. So now all I need to do is close this model and move on to the next. Okay, so the next model we are going to look at is the mirror tool in feature mode. So again, I'm going to choose create and document while in my 122 folder and name this 122 mirror feature and my last name. I'm going to click OK, and it's going to open up my workspace. Okay, so the way that I'm going to draw this model is I'm going to start with a sketch on my right side. And I'm doing this because I want to show you guys some combinational features and make sure that you remember them from previous models. So I'm going to rotate to my right. And starting on my right side, I just need to draw a basic rectangle. So I'm going to draw that rectangle around my origin. And then I need to dimension this to 0.75 in depth. So there's 0.75. And then my overall height of this is 1. So we are just going to type a 1, and there that is. So now I'm going to finish my sketch, and I'm going to orbit, not that way, right around so I have that isometric. And now I'm going to grab my extrude tool, And my total size of this box, I'm going to flip directions. I want it to go that way. And I am going to make sure that this says 1. That's exactly what I need. And we're going to hit the check. So now it's given me this cube, but this isn't quite what I have. In my drawing, I have a cutout here that's 0.75 wide and 0.5 inches tall. So I'm going to grab my sketch tool and I'm going to come on to the front surface of here and I'm going to rotate to the front and I'm going to grab my rectangle tool and I'm going to start in this corner and I'm going to drag down and over. I'm going to make sure I don't lock myself into that line because I won't be able to dimension. So now I'm going to grab my dimension tool and this is going to be 0.75 and we're going to hit enter. And then this is going to be 0.5 and we're going to hit enter. So now I have that fully dimensioned. I'm going to hit my check mark and return to my isometric view. And I'm going to grab my extrude tool again, but I'm going to choose remove this time. And I'm going to click in that surface and it's already set to 1 inch, which is my depth. And I'm going to hit the check mark. So now I have that L shape that's made right there. So I just really quickly want to check the measurement. You know what? We're just going to go with it. This top part looks a little bit thinner than what I was looking at, but that's totally okay. And that is because my overall extrusion was actually incorrect. So here's a fun way that you can fix that. When you notice on a drawing that you have an incorrect extrusion, you can go back to that feature. And I actually did my math wrong because it's 0.75 plus 0.5, not 0.25. So this is actually an extrusion of 1.25. And when I hit enter, it's going to automatically update that. And when I hit the check, it readjusts that cutout based upon that new number that I put in there. So that's a really easy way to fix mistakes. Super handy to know. So now that I have this, I actually need to put a new sketch on the top of here. And I'm going to rotate to my top. And what this wants is us to put a hole on the top of here. So I am just going to grab my point tool. And I'm going to put it right there. And I need to dimension this so it is in the center of that area. So we know that this is 0.75 by 0.75. So if we do the math on that and we divide 0.75 in half, we've got 0.375. So I need to dimension here to here, 0.375. That's going to put it smack on half. And it's giving me a sketch could not be solved. That is because I have it constrained onto that edge. We're just going to leave it because it's pretty close. Okay, so now that's put that point tool in the center and I'm going to hit check. It's okay that that's red because I have the location that I need. So we're just going to roll with it. So I'm going to rotate here and I'm going to rotate so I can see this a little bit better. And I'm going to pinch to zoom. And now I'm going to grab my hole tool. And I just want a simple hole, and that diameter is 0.375. And we're going to change this to through because we want the hole to go all the way through. I'm going to select that point and hit my check mark. Okay, so the last thing we have to do based upon the blueprint on slide 44 is that we have to apply fillets to the corner here and the corner here. In order to be able to do that, I'm going to select the fillet tool and I'm going to select these front two vertical lines and I'm going to change this to 0.25 like it says on slide 44, hit my enter key and then click the check mark. So now I've created half of what it actually wants this drawing to be. If you bounce over to slide 45, it actually shows you that it wants you to mirror this to create another portion. So I am going to zip around to my front view and then I am going to grab my mirror tool and it says entities to mirror. So I'm going to click here and then my mirror plane, I am going to click here. And then I'm just going to hit that check mark and now it has created that entire surface. And that is the mirror tool as a feature. So the difference between this and the sketch was that here we mirrored a 3D object versus just mirroring 2D parts. All right, so now all I have to do is close the sketch, or close document, and I am finished. All right, so we are going to do the last model for 122, and that is using the Loft tool. So I'm going to hit create and choose document. We're going to call this 122 Loft and your last name. And we're going to hit OK. It's going to open our workspace, and if we look at the slides starting on slide 51, we can see that it wants us to make a rectangular prism that is 2.5 wide, 1.5 tall, and 1.5 inches deep. So I'm going to start by putting a sketch on my front view, and I'm going to rotate using my view cube to the front and hit my corner rectangle. I'm just going to draw my rectangular shape. And then I'm going to grab my dimension tool and dimension this to 1.5 inches, so 1.5, hit my enter key, and dimension this bottom edge to 2.5 inches or 2.5. Then I'm going to close my sketch. I'm now going to rotate back to the front view, and if you guessed we were going to use the Extrude tool, you are correct. So I'm going to select that rectangle, but I want to flip the direction. So I'm going to go down here and choose opposite direction. And then I need to change this depth to 1.5. I'm going to hit enter to get my preview. Looks good. So I'm going to hit my green check mark. Now this next bit is where it gets a little bit tricky because we have to do 2 more sketches and we have to use construction lines to guide what we're creating. So I'm going to start with my front. So on slide 52, you'll see that we have a whole bunch of lines that we have to create. So I'm going to go to sketch, I'm going to choose the front, and I'm going to rotate to my front. Now the trick is, if you look at the drawing on slide 52, we have 2 vertical lines that we have to create, and they have to be equal in terms of the angle from each other. And they have to be a certain distance from the left, right, and bottom edges. So in order to find that distance and get those lines to be constrained properly, we need to start by creating some construction lines to guide our drawing. So I'm going to start by grabbing my line tool, and I'm going to draw a line across the bottom of my model. I'm going to hit my escape key, and I'm then going to turn this line into a construction line. So I'm going to click on the line, and then click on my construction option. I'm then going to grab my dimension tool, and I'm going to change the distance from this construction line to the bottom edge of my rectangular prism to 0.25, as is indicated in our drawing. I'm now going to grab my line tool again, and I'm going to draw a line over the left edge of my model, hit my escape key, and I am going to turn this one into a construction line as well. I'm now going to grab my dimension tool, and I'm going to click on the construction line I just created and the left edge of the model and turn that to 0.25 and hit enter. I need to do 1 more construction line, and that is across the right side, just like that. Hit the escape key, highlight my line, and choose construction. Grab my dimension tool, and the distance from this to the right edge is 0.25. Now that I have these construction lines in place, they'll guide the lines that I have to create, those angled lines. So I'm going to come up here where my construction line and the top edge of my rectangular prism meet. And I'm going to click, and I'm going to go down to this construction line where I have that depth. I'm then going to use this to go to the other corner, and then I'm going to hit my escape key. So now I have this V shape in here, but it's not equal like the shape that I have in my image. I could use my dimension tool and try and figure out how to dimension it, but you'll notice that in the image we have these tiny little equal signs. That's actually referring to a specific constraint in our constraint menu called the equal constraint. So the equal constraint allows us to have 2 lines to have the equal length and radii and make them equivalent to each other. So I'm going to grab my equal constraint, and I'm going to click on my 2 angled lines, and you'll see that it automatically adjusted to make that really nice V shape that I need. So I'm going to hit my escape key, and I'm going to get rid of these construction lines by just clicking on them and pushing my backspace or delete key. So I'm going to delete those lines just like that. And then I'm going to close my front sketch. So now you'll see we have this V shape drawn on the front. Now on slide 53, it's telling us that we have to go to the back of the block. So I'm going to use my view cube and rotate so I can see the back of my cube, or my rectangular prism, sorry. And I'm going to hit sketch and I'm going to select the back. Now that I have the back selected, I'm going to center that using my view cube. And this is going to be a little bit tricky because we do not want our lines that we're drawing here to intersect with these. So just be careful where we're clicking as we create this. So I'm going to start with my construction lines again. So I'm going to grab my line tool and draw a horizontal line across my rectangular prism and hit my escape key. I'm going to turn this line by highlighting it into a construction line with my construction option. And then I'm going to dimension it so that it is 0.75 inches from the bottom edge. And I'm super close to that already. It's barely going to move. Now I need two vertical construction lines on the left and the right that are 0.5 from the edge. So I'm going to start with the left. I'm going to hit my escape key. Going to highlight, construct, grab my dimension tool, click on that construction line in the left edge, and make that 1/2 inch. I'm going to do the same thing on the right hand side. Click, click, hit my escape key, highlight the line, hit construct, grab my dimension tool, and go from the construction line to the edge and label it 0.5. Now, just like I did on the other side, I'm going to grab my line tool. I'm going to start where the construction line and the top of my rectangular prism meet. And I'm going to click down to my horizontal construction line and then click back up to my other construction line. I'm going to hit my escape key. I'm now going to grab my equal constraint, and because I just used it, it's still at the top of my menu. So I'm going to hit equal constraint, and I'm going to click on these two lines, and it's going to equalize them for me. I'm going to hit escape, and then I'm going to get rid of these extra construction lines. So now I'm going to hit my green check mark, and I'm going to rotate back so that way I have an isometric view from the front. So now we're going to use our Loft tool, which is right over here. I'm going to select Loft, and I'm actually removing material with my Loft, so I'm going to choose Remove. And it wants the profiles that we're starting and finishing with. So I'm going to carefully select the profile on the front, use my view cube, and select the profile on the back. And you'll notice that it cuts away that material, and I'm just going to hit the check mark. And now I am all done with my loft. Now the thing that's handy about this is it created that angled edge. So this is lower in the front than it is the back. So it's like a nice sweeping ramp. So that's the end of the Loft tool. So I'm just going to close that document and I'm all finished.